All right, and joining me right now from NASA, I'm really excited about this, is Dr. Ken Carpenter. We are celebrating 30 years of the Hubble telescope. I guess, Ken, it's making me feel old because I remember marveling at this, and I wasn't that small of a kid at that time.
Well, same here. I've been involved with Hubble since before launch, and who would have thought 30 years later we'd be here, still talking about it with a fully functional spacecraft. It's wonderful and amazing,
Oh,
and a testament to the people who built it.
absolutely. Now, Ken, tell us a little bit about the history of Hubble, how the idea came about, and let's start at the beginning with this.
Well, if you really want to go back to the beginning, the real beginnings of Hubble were a paper that was written by Lyman Spitzer. He was a professor at Princeton, and back in 1946, he wrote a paper for the RAND Corporation. I don't know if you remember that, but RAND Corporation was one of these think tanks that was designed to give people the freedom and the support to go out there and think deep thoughts and really come up with stuff that didn't necessarily have an immediate payoff, a little bit like Bell Labs was later in life.
Okay.
Anyways, he wrote a paper with a wonderful title called something like "On the Advantages of an Extraterrestrial Telescope." Sounds like he's looking for ET or something, but he just went off the ground, above the atmosphere. And he pointed out the two big advantages of being above the atmosphere in orbit around the Earth for a telescope is that A, you'll see colors of light that don't get through the atmosphere, like ultraviolet, which is bluer than what the eye sees, bluer than what gets through the atmosphere, and infrared, that's redder than what the eye sees and redder than what gets through the atmosphere. So you get a broad panchromatic coverage. The second advantage is that you're not looking through a turbulent atmosphere that is smearing out your light from distant objects.
Yeah, and I guess what you're talking about, and this is why people don't realize that the air bends light, and that's why stars twinkle. It's like a little flicker because that pinpoint of light moves around, correct?
Right, so it's not just that it can bend the light, but that it's variable, that it's moving around. So it's hard to get a sharp image because over time you average over a larger area than the star actually subtends on the sky. So being above the atmosphere lets you get sharper images, and being above the atmosphere lets you see a broader range of colors. So those are two very important things. They were recognized as advantages, but in 1946, remember, we hadn't launched anything into space yet, so it was considered a very far-fetched idea. So it took quite a few years, actually, until, NASA hadn't even been formed yet. That happened in 1959, and then over the years, there were various discussions with Congress, and finally in 1976, I think it was, the mission got what's called a new start, where Congress appropriated money to go and actually begin to develop the mission. And that was started in 1976, and we didn't launch till 1990. So it still took a long time to get the initial designs done and get the thing built to specs. And then we were ready to go in 1986, but that's when Challenger accident occurred, and we were delayed for 4 years while they recovered from that, figured out how to resume launches safely. So we ended up being on the ground another 4 years. Although I think that gave us time to really fine tune the telescope on the ground. So when we got into space, we were ready to go. If we'd launched in 86, maybe it would have been a little slower startup. So we didn't lose 4 years, but maybe three and a half.
Yeah. Now you said fine tune, but there's an interesting thing that some people may forget. They still had to make another adjustment, didn't they?
Nobody forgets. Yeah, no, there was a problem in the ground testing and measurement of the primary mirror, in that it was ground extremely precisely, but was a little off in the curve, a little, I forget whether it was I think a little too steep. So by the thickness of a human hair, it was off the ideal curve at the outer limits of the mirror. So the curve was just a little off, but very precisely. So when we discussed, and that's what was causing what's called spherical aberration and the blurring of images. When we discovered this, because it was very precisely ground, if not accurately, we were able to prescribe correction glasses for it. I mean, we used mirrors, but it's the same principle as wearing glasses that just took the light. We put in corrective optics that had the opposite error. So if it was, a little too curved up on the ends, the glasses made it curve down a little too much, and they cancel out and you get the originally desired perfect curve. And that's what we did on the first servicing mission in 1993, 3 years after launch. Went up there, put in one new wide field camera that had the correction built into it. And then for the others, we put in this device called CoStar, which is a box we slipped into the telescope. And it's like a Rube Goldberg kind of thing almost. You'd almost think it wouldn't work, but you plug this thing in, it springs mirrors out in front of all the other instruments. They intercept the light, do that correction, and then send the corrected light into the instruments. And this all worked wonderfully. I mean, it was absolutely amazing. Every instrument that it was intended to correct, it did. And the characterization by one of the engineers was, the images are now as good as the laws of physics permit.
Wow, that's amazing. Now, the one thing that I love saying about it too is it's not only that it's looking beautifully far out in space, it's a time machine, isn't it? How long ago is it looking?
Well, the universe, one of the results that Hubble is famous for is measuring the age of the universe more precisely, and that's come out to about 13.8 billion years. Now, Hubble cannot see all the way back to the beginning yet, but we have, with using certain tricks of nature and looking in directions on the sky where there are some things called gravitational lenses, we've been able to look back 13.4 billion years. So the galaxies and stars that we're seeing in those observations, we are seeing as they were more than 13 billion years ago. They could be gone now and we wouldn't know because light hasn't had time to travel that huge distance all the way to us. So that's the record so far, about 13.4 billion years. Anything from a couple of light minutes away in our solar system to more than 13 billion years back near the origin of the universe.
Wow, yeah, because we all think light is instantaneous, but it does have a speed to it. And I always joke around a little bit because, as a side note, people are always like, "Oh, I wonder if there's someone out there watching us." Well, the closest planet watching us is probably looking at us back when really there wasn't much to look at.
Quite possibly. Maybe if they're at Alpha Centauri, it's only 4 years, but if they're, any sort of typical distance away, it's going to be hundreds of years, if not thousands or millions.
Wow. So what did it cost to put this up?
Well,
or did I hit a question that you don't know exactly?
No, that's, I'm just trying to figure out how best to characterize it. I think the best way is to look at the life cycle cost. What's the total cost over all 30 years? And that comes to about $16 billion, which if you divide by the number of years and say the number of people in the country, that ends up being about the price of a vending machine, a soda can from a vending machine, about $1.30 a year per person in the US. So, wouldn't you give up a can of soda to get the beautiful images and science results that we're getting from Hubble? I think it's a good bet.
Absolutely. We are learning a lot. And so now let me ask you this. Before we even get to the images, that's the cool stuff, but what is next? It's 30 years old. How much longer is Hubble going to be around?
Well, we think right now we're at the peak of our scientific capability with the new instruments that were put on during the last servicing mission. We are still in high demand. The astronomical community puts in proposals every year telling us what they want to observe, and we continually get 6 times more proposals than we have time to allocate. So that shows you the demand is still there. People still have brilliant ideas for what to look at, and it actually hurts us that we have to turn down 5 out of 6 proposals, because most of them are actually quite good. You don't have 5 out of 6 being bad by any means.
Yeah.
So there's still no deficit of ideas at all. And we would hope to operate toward the end of the 2020s and beyond. It's a question of how long the hardware lasts, but we have backups, side B, et cetera, of instruments and other hardware on the telescope. So as long as that all lasts, we'll go. And our commitment basically from NASA headquarters is that we'll run as long as we're scientifically productive.
Okay.
You have to figure out what that means, but I think as long as you've got a functioning camera, and certainly if you've got a spectrograph along with it, you can still do great science, and we'll keep on going. So we're trying to operate Hubble as best we can now to maximize lifetime without hurting the quality of science that we're getting out now, because
Yeah,
everything's
'cause
working gorgeously. You don't want to cut short now.
if you think about it, 1990, I mean, that's long ago when you're talking about technology, that we're still getting meaningful things. Because I did have a viewer who was like, oh, what's going to happen to Hubble? So there's no plans on it going away anytime soon.
No, no, we're doing our best to keep it going, to make it very, very productive now. And, you know, the hardware is good. We launched with some relatively primitive hardware, as you're saying. The spacecraft computer that we launched with, believe it or not, had 64K of memory. K, not meg or gig, but K. We did, in one of the servicing missions, we put on a really advanced computer, which is based on a 486 chip with plenty of memory. So that sounds also very primitive, but it's plenty for the kind of operations that we do. You know, we need to be able to transmit commands to tell it what to do. We need to be able to get the data back. And, you know, if you have the tried and true technology like that on board, you're more robust, you're more likely to last for 30 years than if you try to put the most recent computer on board that hasn't been properly tested and vetted for operation in a vacuum and hot and cold temperatures that you see in space.
Oh, yes. Yeah, that's absolutely true. Now, one last question before we get to images. How do you power it? I mean, people are going to sit there and go, wow, how does it keep on going?
It's powered totally by solar panels. So it's using sunlight to turn into electricity. A lot of people don't actually realize that we have no reaction rockets, no jets, no thrusters to do any station keeping. We use electric power to spin up what are called reaction wheels, very massive disks of material that spin at very high speeds. And if we want to move the telescope, we apply electricity to one of these wheels and spin up the rotation. And as you spin that wheel up one way, the telescope moves the other way.
Huh.
So you don't
Wow.
need jets or rockets to move you around. Now, we can only pretty much change the pointing of the telescope that way. We can't like change orbits. And occasionally when a piece of debris goes whizzing by, we wish we had rockets too. But, you know, after 30 years, you probably wouldn't have, you know, working, you wouldn't have fuel or whatever anyways. So it's good to be just depending on solar and sunlight. We did change the solar arrays over the years a couple of times, but the set we have on now is very robust. It's producing still more power than we need. So we've got margin. We lose, I think, 4% a year as the array ages, but we've got plenty to last into the 2030s.
Now, you mentioned something and I have to ask, has it gotten hit yet? Because there's a lot of space junk.
We know for sure that it got hit once because in one of the servicing missions, we found a hole in one of the antenna. We have what are called high gain antennas that stick out the sides of the telescope, if you've ever seen them, with little bowl shapes on the end. And one of them has a hole about the size of a quarter or a nickel, something like that in it, where a piece of debris apparently went through it. Fortunately, it just went through the antenna, not the other side. And the antenna is still perfectly usable because most of the surface is still there. We'd have been in more trouble if it had gone through and, you know, hit the computer or something.
All right, well, let's hit the cool stuff. How can someone enjoy the images of Hubble? You've got a website where people, and you can share some of the images here, right?
Yeah, so let me see if I can bring it up here. There's a website that we put together called 30 Years, 30 Images,
Wow.
which hopefully you can see on the screen
yes,
now. So you can go to this, basically it's hosted on Flickr. You can also go to nasa.gov/Hubble and click on the button that says 30th anniversary. And there's all sorts of material there. In addition to these pictures, there's videos, there's text articles, you know, all sorts of cool things. So definitely go to nasa.gov/Hubble as well. But if you just want to go through 30 of the most beautiful images that Hubble has gotten over the last 3 decades, go to this site on Flickr. So it's a Flickr album and just NASA Hubble Space Telescope. So here, we don't have time to go through all 30,
No,
but let me start with this guy here.
wow.
Maybe that doesn't expand it a whole lot more. So we'll just stay in the original mode. Here, this is the image that we put out for the 30th anniversary. Can you see my cursor okay?
Yes.
Okay, so this is a nebula, a cloud of dust and gas, which is a stellar nursery. It's an area full of stars and forming planetary systems. So it's an area where planets and stars very distant from us are forming. And this area has a lot of very massive stars that are 10 to 20 times the mass of the sun. They're much brighter than the sun, but they have much shorter lifetimes because they burn up their nuclear fuel much quicker because they're sending out more more energy per second. So you can see if you look at the red nebula here, it's incredible structures, all sorts of turbulence and clouds and shock fronts and areas that have been cleared out by the bright starlight. If you get this on a computer, you can zoom into it and just appreciate the level of detail that Hubble is able to show you there.
Wow.
In the bottom left is a slightly different creature. This blue area with the ring, that was all formed by one star. The area to the upper right is dozens and dozens, maybe hundreds of these really bright stars. This one here was a star that was perhaps 200,000 times brighter than the sun. And as it aged in its death throes, it threw out material in a series of explosions. And that's what you see. This outer diffuse ring was early on, and then later in its lifetime, it threw out a series of smaller rings that formed that kind of filamentary ring structure. And many stars do this as they die. They either send off modest amounts of material repeatedly, or they go off in one huge explosion if it's a really, really massive star. And that's called a supernova. Wow. That you may have heard of. So this picture shows star birth in the upper right and the results of star death in the lower left.
And what about the image just right to the right of that? What is that?
That's another image that shows you what happened as a star's age. So again, a star is dying, it's throwing off material. So there's these open bells on two sides, which results from material being thrown off in a stellar wind, probably along the magnetic poles of the star where the material can get out more easily, because if it's charged plasma, it doesn't like the cross magnetic lines, so it tends to get out at the poles. But then you've got these rings as well. And again, a sign that material was thrown off from this dying star at multiple different times. So it's images like this which really challenge the theoretical physicists who's trying to model it. If you have a star and it just explodes, nice spherical ball, that's a pretty easy thing to calculate. You look at a picture like that and say, oh my, how am I going to model that? So we leave that as an exercise for the interested reader or maybe a future PhD student to actually model that from basic physics.
Yeah. Ooh.
The Lagoon Nebula on the left here is another area of star formation. This was taken back in 2018. Again, gorgeous. You can see some dust clouds in the foreground here, which look black because they're blocking light from the background stars. You see orange and yellow areas where the gas is glowing because they're heated up by stars embedded in the material. Again, this is a region where we'd be expecting to see a lot of stars and hopefully surrounding planetary systems being formed. And you see the different colors because you have different elements giving off light. Something like oxygen might glow green, something like hydrogen, red, etc. So you can, the colors, in addition to looking pretty, can tell you what's there and tell you something about the physics.
Wow.
Can't stop at everyone here, but here's another gorgeous result of a star exploding. This huge bubble of material is all resulting from a star that you can no longer see at the center that exploded years ago, called the Hubble Nebula. So, you know, no surprise there. This image here of Westerlin 2, another star birth region that we sent out as the 25th anniversary image. So this was a very important time 5 years ago when we marked the quarter century mark for Hubble, another area of star birth and star death. We just pan down here since we're
short a little bit on time. I know you've got other people to talk to. Wow, a colliding galaxy? Is that right there on the lower left? Yeah. Yes,
that's two galaxies. This one may have passed through or nearby and gotten distorted, which is why this S shape is here. It may be why there's extra star formation up here. There's actually a better example down here where the two galaxies are still interacting, not just after a collision, but you see they're still pulling material from one to the other, and you actually have star formation in the dark space between the galaxies because of that. And to the right of that, this is just a great example of the variety we see depending on the details of the collision. we get all sorts of bizarre shapes. And this is just a handful of some of the more intriguing ones.
And we've learned that actually the Milky Way where we live is going to eventually go through a collision, right?
Yeah, the Andromeda Galaxy, which is the nearest neighbor spiral galaxy, is going to come through us in about 4 billion years. So we get plenty of time to not worry about it. It'll be glorious as it approaches, though. You'll have a galaxy that you'll see with the naked eye, you know, extending over half the sky. And oh boy, I'd love to see that.
Oh, yeah. Ooh.
This is my favorite image. If you were to ask me my favorite image, it's this, the Carina Nebula. It's a huge mosaic of multiple Hubble images put together. And some of the most famous Hubble images, like down in here, is Mystic Mountain, which was actually right here.
Oh.
This is Mystic Mountain. It's only a tiny, tiny fraction of this mosaic. So this one Carina Nebula is full of all sorts of very classic objects on the sky, classic Hubble images, like Mystic Mountain, like the Eta Carina star that's exploding is over here. This is something, again, if you download it on your computer at full resolution, you can fly around and zoom in for hours and just get amazed at the turbulence, the shock waves, the forming clouds, the dying stars, everything is there. So that's my favorite image. And there is on the main Hubble site, you can download a file that will allow you to print it out as a poster, you know, mounted on your wall.
Yeah. Wow. Thank you. Wow. All right. Well, I find this, you know, and here's the thing. I mean, the segment is called That's Cool. I think people can spend a long time going through all these images and learning, and what better project can you find than this for some of the parents who are trying to educate their kids at home. Do you have any final words that you want to tell people about NASA and anything cool that people should check out?
Well, as I said, to keep up with Hubble, I would go to nasa.gov/Hubble. On the web, you can follow us on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram with the handle @NASA Hubble, all one word smashed together, NASA HUBBLE, and that will allow you to continually be updated on what Hubble is doing. There's a lot of stuff out there for the 30th anniversary. We just had a series of happy birthday wishes from various celebrities and social media folks that you might want to look at. It's kind of fun. There's actually a challenge out today. If any of your viewers want to do this, it says, if you want to send your own happy birthday greetings to Hubble, send them out to us. Use a hashtag Happy Birthday Hubble, Hubble hashtag Hubble30. And, you know, if it's a really great thing, we may even repost it from the NASA Hubble account, but people will see it in any case.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Ken Carpenter, and I hope you're enjoying your home working and doing as much research as you can from your home office, or I assume this is your home office here.
Yeah, it's my home office, and you know, our days are just full of telecons, you know, but from start to finish. So we're still working hard, but it's you know, it's fun stuff, and we're glad that we were able to commemorate the 30th anniversary in some way, even though we had to cancel a lot of our live events. We're trying to make up for it, you know, this way via virtual events and interactions. So thank you so much for your interest, and we love to talk to people. And call us back in the future at one of our future live shot events.
I will. One of my good friends, Joe Whitty, always is trying to get me to talk more about space, and I agree with it. Thank you so much, Dr. Carpenter.
Thank you. Take care.